So you're thinking about jumping back into that war game. It could be Warhammer 40,000. It could be Battletech. It could be some other miniature-based game from the perspective of back in the day, and that could be 10 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. I'd say 3 years or longer, because that's kind of a cycle of change, both in the community and possibly the rule set. You're thinking about jumping back in. You stopped playing for whatever reason. How do we approach that? How do we jump in to get back into the hobby and cut down that learning curve to winning? Because there is going to be a learning curve. So the first thing, of course, your army, the miniature, the forces. Maybe you're checking out new models, new units. You're thinking about acquiring them. You're thinking about updating your army. You want to pause there for a moment, because depending on the game system, your army might still be completely viable, just as it is, like Battletech. Bring your mechs, you can play them. You might need to adjust a few things. Some weapon configurations aren't around anymore, so you change a few things. Or something like Warhammer 40,000, if your army's 3 years old, it's done. It's really, really done. You're going to need to tear it down and completely reboot it. I say that jumping in because there's two things, and this is not a criticism. Your tactica is locked. Your understanding of the game, let's say you haven't played in 3 years, is locked to 3 years ago. Your army is locked to 3 years ago. To try and start expanding your army, if you have to do that, it's not going to be the most efficient thing. And I'm there. I'm feeling you, right? Being a miniature-based gamer, we want to jump in. We want to add new models. We want to do that stuff. So the first thing to explore is, what are the new rules? And the best way to do that, in addition to that, is just playing a few games. Whether it's part of a gaming club, a group, or you and your friends have brought out your models. Be like, look, the next 5 games are just going to be about putting what we have on the table and figuring out the changes to the rules, figuring out that meta, figuring out the differences. Allow yourself that. Once you establish that, now you're going to have a clearer direction of how and where and if you need to update your army. And that's when we start to pursue and look, do we just add units? Is it a complete teardown? Do I just kind of shelve the army and keep it? Maybe I start a new army, maybe a completely new army, or new lance, or new group. The second thing, of course, is the rules itself and how the meta has changed. And the meta is kind of the area that you play in, whether that's competitive play, narrative play, story play. You're going to have to make those adjustments. And a lot depends on the addition and the changes. Again, some rule sets might have no changes or very slight adjustments or maybe a supplement, and other things might be a completely different game. So you're going to have to approach that. And there's some excitement in there, right? There's some excitement because this is a game that you love, you're returning. You get to accelerate that enthusiasm, but you also get to enjoy it as a new game. So don't necessarily be in a rush to kind of learn everything. The last piece, and this is kind of subjective, the local meta itself, literally physically, the group that you play with. And this can be like basement battle reports, the 3 of you, 3 friends in a basement. Warhammer 40,000, when I jumped in back in the day, we were going to get some Dungeons & Dragons miniatures. And we're at the hobby store. And we see orcs with guns. We see Space Marines. We see Imperial Army. And right away we're like, we're in. We're sold. I don't even know the rules. We're done. There was a Land Raider. We're sold. It's done. We're in. And you had to immediately pick your army right there. I was with my buddy Naps and my buddy Dom. Naps is like, we're doing Space Marines. Dom is like, I'm going to do this. So I'm flipping through the book. I'm like, oh, Eldar Pirates. Okay, I'm going to play Eldar. So we jump in with that. I finally, years later, a long time later, my buddy Miguel, he got stuck with squats. I won't say he got stuck with him because he wanted to play squats back in the day. And he was really upset. He was really salty at Games Workshop. Not that we need any reason to be salty at GW, because they squatted his squats. Well, squats are back. So, you know what? Things are okay and things are good again. But from that perspective, I say that because the meta that you play, my early Warhammer 40K was every Friday. It was just the 3 of us playing. We would have 3-way battles, 4-way battles. Put your miniatures down. Points, who cares? You got a tank, play it. And it was very much beer and pretzels. Later on, going to the Battle for Salvation and other gaming clubs, depending on the era, it was narrative play or it was competitive play. I say this framework because the last piece you need to approach is you might have come from a completely narrative background, and now the gaming club or group where you're at or hobby store is competitive focused. Or you might have been competitive focused, smashing everyone, and now you're showing up and narrative. That's not to say returning or playing the game how you enjoy it, but be open to the possible shifts and opportunities that this new edition has created. That's the advice to jump back into a game, to cut down that learning curve and get back into the win as soon as possible.